So, welcome back to the Mentor Sessions, a part of the OnPoint podcast series from Acceleration Point. And I'm your host, Linda Traylor. This is a podcast where I sit down with medical affairs leaders who are not just good leaders, they rise to the level of exceptional leaders, in my opinion, because they're leaders that have shaped this profession and pay it forward by developing exceptional leaders themselves, which means these are people you want to hear from. My next guest today is someone I've had the privilege of knowing for nearly 3 years, first as a client of Acceleration Point, and more recently as, I don't know if you would agree with me, but a thought partner whose perspective I genuinely think sharpens my own thinking. Lee Gervitz is the Senior Vice President of Medical Affairs at Xenon Pharmaceuticals, which is a neuroscience-focused biopharmaceutical company. I will let him tell you his story, but what I find most compelling about Lee isn't just his depth of resume, which, by the way, is very impressive. It's really how he thinks. He's the kind of leader who brings both intellectual rigor and that genuine curiosity to every conversation. Over the course of working with his team for the last several months, an example of what I mean by this is that he shared with me a behavioral framework that really sparked some curiosity in myself. And I went and did some research, a lot of research. And it was so compelling that I've started integrating it into my own client interactions and engagements. And that does not happen often, by the way. So it's rare to meet someone who challenges your thinking and makes you want to do your homework, which I love. But Lee is one of those people.
Welcome to OnPoint, the Mentor Sessions podcast, where the most exceptional leaders in medical affairs share their real stories behind their growth, mistakes, breakthroughs, and leadership journeys. The views and opinions expressed by our guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of their employers or affiliated organizations.
So welcome to the podcast, Lee.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you for having me. It's really fun to be here.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna, as you know, we have a series of questions. Starting off with professional questions, and then some more personal questions on you as a leader and a person. The first one is, tell us your story. How did you become a medical affairs professional?
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you that story. I don't know. It was one of those things. The kind of a career I fell into is probably a better description of it. I was in grad school. I did my PhD in physiology at the medical school at Texas Tech, and I was always drawn to kind of the scientific and clinical side of medicine. But as I was going through my graduate program, I found myself increasingly more interested in how decisions get made across organizations and how evidence and strategy and people and timing of it all kind of come together to shape impact for patients. And I knew that just let's call it the publish or perish world of academia was not necessarily going to be for me. And so I enrolled in an MBA program in health organization management with the thought that I'd maybe go into hospital or clinic administration and try to help affect change in that kind of capacity as part of a career plan. And that really shifted when we had moved and I met a new neighbor. And this gentleman, his name's Todd, worked for a company, and he was a sales rep for Celebrex. And I got to start hearing what he was doing and what was going on and what's happening in industry and in pharma. And he had said to me, you should really think about coming to join Pharma. And I told him that sounded interesting, but not sure that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure if I could see myself either in pharma and necessarily as a sales rep. And he said, I'm not talking about a sales rep. I mean, as an MSL. And I was like, what the hell is an MSL? And the more I learned about it, the more I started to fall in love with the idea. And then back in those days, it was, I don't know, probably 95% of the MSLs were PharmDs. They weren't PhDs. It was still very much dominated by the PharmD group. And I got very lucky. I had been applying to a ton of different companies, just trying to get into the industry and break in. And one gentleman by the name of Bob Thompson at Procter and Gamble, when P&G had a pharmaceutical business, saw my resume, and he too just happened to be a fellow physiologist. And so he said, "Listen, this guy at least deserves an interview." And he opened the door to this wonderful career that I've gotten to have in the pharma sector, and both in medical affairs as well as commercial and other roles. But we'll jump into that. So, and I'll tell you kind of the funny conclusion of that one was when I got in for an interview with Bob, and just loved it, and just wanted the job so badly, and had interviewed for this position. And he called me like the day after, and he told me that it was a great interview. He said, but he was really a little bit sad because they were going to go with a different candidate for that territory. And he asked me, any chance you'd be interested in a slightly different territory? Because I had been applying for a role that they just had open. It didn't matter to me where it was. I just wanted a role. And the original role was actually to go to Nebraska. And he said, we're filling that role with somebody who's from there, et cetera. And he said, but if you're open to any other territory, I said, anything. And he said, we have being in Minneapolis. Do you want to go to Minnesota? Like, I'll take the job. I'm so excited. He said, have you ever been to Minnesota? It's a little colder there than it is in Texas. And it didn't matter. It was just the opportunity to join the industry and break in, and just loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Gosh, that story is, I have to say, there's elements of it that I'm not completely surprised by, because it's not surprising to me that you were drawn to the complexity of clinical science side, impacts on patient care, and it's complex, and it has that human element, and that's from what I know about you, I know that's something that you're drawn to, on how people behave. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that you were drawn to it. I love the fact, and I think that is a good takeaway from any listeners, is that you just have to lean into, like, getting that first job is the biggest step. And so kind of leaning into just doing whatever it takes to get in, and going from there is one of the biggest hurdles, especially today, since it's so competitive. It's a different world from when we tried to become MSLs a minute ago, but yeah, it's the same issues. You just have to be persistent and do what it
Yeah.
takes to get the job.
Yeah, it's part of it is, building out a network, getting advice, and kind of getting connections. If you can volunteer in the summers, if you could do an internship, if there are different programs, if you're really interested in it, is try to get connected with folks because that's where you're going to obviously have a leg into that. There's a lot of programs now that even have, postdoctoral or post-education internships that come out of their professional degrees into doing something within the pharma sector, and that gives you an opportunity to join in. And then, within medical affairs, just really enjoyed that environment. And then across career, which I'm sure we're going to get into, was then opportunities to say, like, I'm still stayed with that kind of passion for wanting to understand better what was happening at a broader enterprise level and get involved, and just leaning into being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and exploring new
Yeah,
opportunities. But I'm sure we'll dig into that.
absolutely. All right. So next question. What is one decision or mindset shift that most positively impacted your career in medical affairs?
Yeah, I'd probably summarize it a little bit for I stopped trying to be right and started trying to be aware of how I think. I know it's subtle, and I'm trying to make a very kind of small distinction between those two, but it is a profound shift. Um, I'm a big fan, as you know, of a concept of metacognition, which is thinking about your thinking. And that changed a lot for me. It's the easiest way I can describe metacognition for listeners, it's really being intentional about what it is that you're thinking about. What am I seeing? What am I noticing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I wondering? And when you start to question those things a little bit more, you really start to focus in on a number of different things. Early in my career, I would say that I probably focused a lot more on the quality of my answers. But then over time, I realized that the real leverage or impact that I could have within a setting was examining the process behind those answers and thinking about those elements, like what are my assumptions? What are some of the biases that I'm bringing to the table? The framing that I was unconsciously or subconsciously applying to how I was discussing things. And once I started to do that, I started to see a change, and I became less reactive to just whatever was happening in that moment and much more deliberate in terms of what is it that I want to try and affect and how can I help in that capacity. I noticed when sometimes I was simplifying too quickly and trying to get down and hone into, one specific answer that just wasn't going to get to it. It's like, hold on a second. Let's hold the ambiguity for a minute and try to understand it from different perspectives. And I think as I evolved in that and kind of matured in it, I became more aware of how others were thinking, not just what they were saying, but really what's behind some of their thinking. And that helped me personally kind of shift from, again, trying to be right in what it was that I was saying to actually trying to be useful in that situation. And when you start, moving up an organization into a leadership position, for me, that becomes almost a force multiplier, if you will, right? Where the hardest problems that you're trying to solve in an enterprise setting, it's not that those problems are solved by better answers. They're actually a lot of times solved by better thinking about that problem itself for a little while. And so I'd say that was definitely one shift, Linda, that for me helped me kind of get to, coming down to the point of what does this room or this situation need right now? And how can I help in that capacity? And yeah, thinking about my thinking certainly helped me do that a little bit more.
I'm going to go back to the conversation a little bit here because as I've gotten to know you, Lee, I think that's an area that I've been interested in and just starting to explore. I've listened to a few podcasts on this topic, and I frankly don't know a lot about it, but the curiosity from it is mostly coming from some of our conversations that we've had. And we haven't had a lot of conversations, but every time we've had a conversation, I walk away thinking, oh, I need to go explore that, or I need to go think about that.
I need to go read more about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that your way of thinking about your thinking and how that had a dramatic shift in the way you led and the way you think about engaging and solving problems at the individual level, but even at the enterprise level, and the complexity along that, how thinking kind of impacts that. It's really powerful. I think it's a really good thing for people to think about and understand from themselves, because it really does, it causes you to slow down and going back to your original statement, to not worrying about being right.
Yeah. It's I'm happy to cover a little bit of it again. It's that process of or the concept of metacognition, right? Think of where it really is. It is truly thinking about your thinking. And when you say that, it sounds silly at first. When I first started learning about the concept, I was like, thinking about your thinking. Like, listen, I do enough thinking. I don't need to think about my thinking. But then as I started kind of digging into it, one of the it was a little cartoon actually that had it drawn out, and I love this little cartoon. And the folks that have been in teams with me know I have a passion for this little tiny cartoon. It's just a person with little bubbles above their head, and all it says is a little simple thing of, what am I seeing? What am I noticing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what am I wondering? And think of how many different situations you're in a professional setting or a personal setting, and how differently you might approach that if you started to dive a little deeper into any one of those aspects. That you would say, like, what am I seeing visually? Like, look around the room. What do you see? And then when you see that, okay, what are you noticing? And what you see and
Mhm.
what you notice are two different things. And then the minute you do that, are you wondering about something? Or are you actually thinking and trying to, gather your thoughts and try to say, okay, here's what I'm thinking, versus, I wonder if. And then the feeling part is, well, I don't know. What are you feeling? Are you, depending on what the setting is, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling worried? Are you feeling upset? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Are you feeling exposed? Do you feel safe? Do you feel useful? Do you feel embarrassed? Whatever that feeling component is, how is that affecting all of the other things? Like, are you noticing that other people might be feeling the same kind of level of uncomfortable? Are you wondering why that is? And just being able to do that and get more comfortable in that moment is what helps you be a little bit more aware of what's happening in the dynamic of that room, and then being able to kind of coalesce that into, what can I do to help in this situation? And it slows you down, and it makes you be much more purposeful in terms of, how can I help?
Being purposeful, the outcome of slowing down, being more purposeful, it takes more work than people realize.
Yeah.
And it's not shutting up and not saying something and trying to slow.
Yeah.
It's
Ab- Absolutely. And if you think about that one, right, of where is it that you can help? Well, the question is, what does that room need at that moment? Does it need better clarity? Does it need a different type of framing? Does it need a challenge?
Which failure or apparent misstep set you up for a later success in your career?
Well, Linda, I've got plenty of mistakes to draw from. Um, I would say, first of all, if you're interviewing leaders and you've got somebody that doesn't have a whole bunch of mistakes to draw from, I would love to understand how they got to the position that they got to, because I think being
Ye-
comfortable with the fact that you've made a lot of mistakes over your career, it's really one of the truly most powerful ways to learn, right? We learn a lot more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. I'll give you one specific one and one general one that I think has helped me across my career. Um, a specific one would be early on in my management career. I actually set up a team that was based on the strengths of a single individual. And even though from background and training from, what I did in graduate school and an MBA in organization management, I should have known better, and yet I still did it. And I put a team construct that tailored around one individual, rather than looking at a more sustainable structure that was independent of that individual, that, for that role. And you fast forward a few months, and that individual ended up leaving the company, and that team nearly collapsed, because it was a team that's design was tailored to the strengths of the individual and not the actual capability needs of the group and of the business. And so team engagement went down, morale went down quickly, and it took so much energy and so much effort to get them back to the right place. Um, it's definitely a lesson that I learned, and I learned the hard way. And it's something that has paid off across the years, where I've had to lead team transformations or corporate restructures, and that let me better evaluate what I would call sustainable needs of a group or that function, and then look at the talent that could help lead that transformation, right? If you're going to design an organization, design it with empty names, right? Boxes with empty names, so that you say, what does this organization need? So that you can understand, here's the structure that's more sustainable and what you have to actually do and deliver. Then you can look at who within the group that we have has the capabilities to lead those functions, those groups. And that will help you move through smoother transitions, and it'll create learning opportunities for the talent that get put into some of those roles. But it's also something that, again, you're building organization for what it needs, not just a single talent. So I've learned that one the hard way. To switch to something on a more personal side of that, of missteps, that have, or quote unquote missteps in career that were situations that have really transformed me, was actually situations in my career where I didn't get a role opportunity that I thought I wanted at that time. And finding that the path I expected to unfold didn't unfold in the way that I wanted to. It was, looking back, those moments actually forced me to broaden rather than narrow. And they pushed me into experiences that, okay, I didn't get that one role that I thought was next for me, and it made me look for something broader or something different. And the end result of that was I actually ended up learning a lot more. It made me more versatile. It helped me move between medical and commercial roles. It helped me better understand context between medical and commercial environments. And so at the time, those things were most certainly not linear, right? It wasn't a career ladder. It became a career lattice as kind of an approach. But now in retrospect, that's exactly what gave me the ability to operate in the kind of role that I have now, where sure, I can bring scientific depth and expertise to the table, but I also can bring enterprise fluency to the table. And those detours that at the time felt like, oh my God, this is a huge misstep that I'm taking in my career, turned out to be foundations for the success that I'm continue to be fortunate enough to have. And so, yeah, when you hit a road bump or you hit a detour, go learn whatever the journey comes. You might be surprised. In retrospect, it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I can name a few in from my career where I didn't get a job I thought I really, really wanted, and it did cause me to think differently on what it was I was trying to accomplish from my career, and think about my career in a different way. So I love that story. I also love your first failure misstep, because I think managers, I knew that at some point I wanted to build a team, like build a team from scratch.
Yeah.
And the first time I got the opportunity to do that, I did not handle it well either, and ended up causing more work for myself than really, and making, like, I'm a very fast decision maker. That's not always good. And your first instinct is not always right, even if the conversation goes well in the interview, for example, and you click. That doesn't mean they're right for the job. And so it's really challenging, doing the work up front on what, as you say, the organization needs, what the group needs, what the capabilities are, and how to distribute those among talent, and giving people opportunities. Those are hard-won lessons, I think. And there's no destiny. I mean, there's no finish line. I think you're always constantly learning.
Yeah, always. Learn every day.
That's a great story. All right. In your opinion, Lee, what separates an exceptional medical affairs leader from a good one?
Yeah, I mean, we all have our personal biases and views on that front, right? I mean, for me, if I try to narrow that down into some form of definition, I would think good medical affairs leaders operate within the system exceptional leaders, they quietly reshape the system itself. Listen, of course, a good medical affairs leader they have to know the science. He, she, or they have to build a capable team. They have to execute well. An exceptional one does all of that. And, right, it's the big and component of it. And also shapes decisions before others even realize that a decision is forming. The exceptional leaders are ones that they're trusted not just for content expertise, right? That's great. Bring the content expertise. But what's your judgment under uncertainty? Can they help anticipate and see around corners, identify where the organization is likely to oversimplify or overreact? And do they bring clarity at the moments that matter the most? And so for those are people that know how to really, they elevate the function from something that is in some organizations seen as a support role to one that is truly a strategic role. So for me, that's what sets them apart as exceptional leaders. They don't just participate in conversations. They shape and frame all of the context through which the organization understands risk, understands evidence, and finds and decides on what opportunities to take.
That is great. Really, I think. So, I hate using words like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's somewhat profound in the way it's and the way you think it through, because I always look at when I'm looking and judging exceptional leaders is like when I'm in the presence of somebody I consider to be an exceptional leader, and I walk away, energized and curious and that is an output of somebody who I think that you're describing is doing that purposefully.
Yeah.
Triggering that. Yeah. Right. It's like that type of leader is intentionally causing you to do that or triggering that in you. And you're probably looking for that response in people as you develop people. So
Yeah.
I really love the way you told that story. Thank you. Okay. Now, how do you define success in medical affairs, and has that definition evolved over time?
Yeah. Let's start with the second part. I mean, it's definitely evolved over time, right? And early in my career, I probably would have defined success more in terms of execution. It would have been one of those things of strong scientific engagement. You have high quality evidence generation. You have credible field teams. You have successful publications, impactful external interactions. Don't get me wrong. I still value all of that, but my definition has certainly evolved. Today, I define success in medical affairs as whether the function is meaningfully changing clinical care behaviors. The quality of clinical decisions, the confidence of stakeholders, and ultimately the experience and outcomes of patients. Success isn't it's not an activity. It's not volume, right? It's whether medical affairs is becoming a trusted voice, again, through those moments of uncertainty where we as a function can actually help change how clinical practice is occurring. Are people taking different decisions in clinical care in a way that matters based on what we bring to the table? And it's one of those. And I know you know this, Linda, from interactions you've had with me. It's like, what am I here to do? What's my hope? I'm here to help change clinical behaviors. And it's something that people deal with all the time, right? It's like medical inertia, clinical inertia. People will keep practicing medicine the same way they've been doing for 20 years. Doesn't mean that that's actually what the data would suggest is what's best for patients sometimes. But changing that and changing care behaviors, yeah, that's where I think success should now be defined is, are you helping truly shift outcomes?
Scott and I just did a webinar yesterday on AI's impact in medical affairs. And the reason why I bring it up, because your answer is what I think is if we absolutely move to thinking that way, that is the role of medical affairs, is to impact clinical behaviors that improve patient care.
Yeah,
That insulates us from the impact of AI, because the things that AI does well is going to free us up to be better at that.
agree.
And
Yeah, AI is
that's something that I'd never be able to do.
AI is a great tool, right? Like, human plus AI. Listen, a good friend of mine is fantastic at saying that human plus AI will always beat out human alone or AI alone. So it's bringing those two pieces together.
I love that. I think that is the new standard. That is the foundation, the baseline, the baseline benchmark of what we should be moving to as a profession. So that is a great summary. Thank you. Okay. What's the worst? Love this question. I'm looking forward to your answer. What's the worst career advice you see commonly given to rising medical affairs professionals?
Yeah, I like this one. It's you see a lot of bad advice here and there, right? That people will give somebody coming up in an organization. It's some version of stay in your lane, or some version of become the deepest expert that you can, and everything else will follow. I mean, yeah, like, expertise matters. Sure, that's great, but it's not enough. It really isn't. Not in medical affairs. Not if you want to be a true professional in that. For a lot of folks that are kind of coming up, a lot of times they're taught to optimize for technical credibility, right? Because without being taught, like, things that matter more, if you really want to be successful professional in that, it's like, who's teaching you how organizations actually work, how influence happens, how priorities are set, how cross-functional trust is built, how strategy gets translated into action. If you're only developing depth from an expertise perspective, you're going to become very well respected, but you're not going to be influential, and you're not going to learn how to be an enterprise leader. You've got to know how to somewhat code shift, if you will, and you change your line of thinking, because the people who really thrive as true medical affairs professional, those are people that know how to pair credibility with judgment. They're going to be able to communicate to much broader audiences, and they have really strong enterprise awareness. And I've seen some incredibly knowledgeable people that just plateaued in their career because they never learned how to influence, or how to prioritize, or how to navigate ambiguity in an organization. They just focused on their expertise. So rather than stay in your lane, you want to help people growing up in an organization, is encourage your teams and talent to get out of their comfort zones, stretch themselves to area that makes them truly uncomfortable, and perhaps even a little scared or a little anxious, because that's where true growth happens. You have to be there for them, and you have to help them navigate that discomfort and learn, and how to adapt, and how to flow through it. But if you tell people just to stay in your lane, you're going to niche them into that, rather than teaching them how to be an enterprise thinker.
Knew you would have a great, phenomenal answer to that question. I'm surprised at the number of people that do plateau sort of in that sphere a little bit, and get and I'm sure human behavior is so complex. There's no one right answer for why people get stuck in their careers. But I think you've hit on something that is preconceived notions of what your job is and what your expertise should be, and then listening to others that maybe you should always question everybody you listen to.
I mean, when people say, like, describe yourself, what do you do? What do you bring to the table, et cetera, right? I mean, it's if you keep progressing in your career, at some point you should be able to kind of sit there and say, like, look, what do I do? I'm an enterprise leader that just happens to be in medical affairs right now. I can also sit in other functions, and if you come purely from a medical affairs perspective, that's great too. You have that fantastic expertise. Bring that to the table. And what else are you bringing to the table? Because that alone is not enough. Not if you want to impact at an enterprise level. That's not going to be enough. So get out of your own comfort zone, look broader. Yeah. And whatever you do, don't just stay in your own lane. Go learn how others think. It'll help you.
What belief about medical affairs did you hold strongly 10 years ago that you completely changed your mind about? And I think you've touched on it, but I'm curious of what you think about that.
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit on it, right? I mean, 10 years ago, I would have believed that medical affairs did excellent scientific work. The organization would naturally recognize our value because of the excellent scientific work that we did. I no longer believe that. Great work matters. Value is not self-evident. It's really not. Medical affairs, for me, has to be intentional about how it defines, how it demonstrates, and communicates its impact. And we have to be able to do that in a way that speaks the language of decision makers without compromising scientific integrity. And if you can do that, great. I've come to believe that one of the biggest responsibilities of medical affairs leadership is not only to do that important work, but to ensure that an organization understands why that work matters and what would be lost without it. Because, going back to one of our earlier discussions, shaping and changing clinical care behaviors, that is not a quick fix. There is so much clinical inertia in how medicine is practiced. Like I said, changing that, it takes time. So
Yeah.
you want to bring value to that, then one of the most difficult things that you're going to need to do as a medical affairs professional is try to ensure that the senior management team can see that they understand that this is a longer journey that you're on and be aligned to it. And sure, that's a tension that is going to be created between how do you have some leading indicators that you're moving in the right direction, because the lagging indicators of you've really made changes in clinical care behaviors, that will come later. Leading versus lagging indicators of change it's not like it's going to shift overnight, right? So yeah, I think that's the value conversation for me has shifted in the last 10 years. And I think as society, health systems gets more complex, that value and how you translate that value and how you make sure others understand that also needs clarity and precision in how you define it. So
I think you've hit on something right there at the last two that I love that. I love that sort of shift in how you're thinking. I do think that the complexity, and I think we have to rethink about what timelines are and what they even mean, and what the leading indicators are versus the lagging indicators, because I think the medical community is going through like as much turmoil and change and struggle.
Yep.
That we have to we have to understand they're going through the same sort of things that we're going through right now in terms of the massive amount of data, the noise, the prioritization challenges. They're going through it. So that's the connection point to understand as well. So I agree. I think it's so complex. It's more to say it's more complex than it's ever been seems a little trite, but it's only getting, it's like the pace at which it's getting more complex is probably what's the big shift here.
Agree.
All right. What new skill, mindset, or technology do you believe medical affairs professionals must adopt to thrive in the next decade?
I'm sure you could guess what my answer to this question would be. And For me, again, whether you want to call it intuitive or counterintuitive, that's for you to decide. I think we need to become students of behavior, not just science. If you're looking for decades, medical affairs has operated on some form of implicit assumption that if we generate and communicate the right evidence, behavior is going to change. That's just not true. That's not going to happen. Clinicians don't change behavior just based on data alone. Systems don't change based on logic alone, and patients don't make decisions based on evidence alone, right? You want to have a different impact, and you want to think of things that we're going to have to adopt into this. You have to really understand human behavior at its core. What drives it, what blocks it, how it changes, how we'll continue to. If you don't do some of that, you're going to overestimate the impact of information, and you're going to really underestimate the complexity of real world adoption. And like I said, there's a lot that's getting complexity is growing almost exponentially with AI. So sure, if you want to go with something that we're going to have to pick up AI. You cannot have a conversation today without some form of AI creeping into it. If anything, AI is going to help, whether you want to call it amplify or potentially even close the gap on the knowledge side. It's going to make information easier. But that means that behavior is going to become the real frontier, because that future and my perspective of what I think the future is going to belong to people who can actually integrate scientific judgment, real world evidence, all the stakeholder insight, and any of the technology enabled decision support in some form of a disciplined way that actually leads to a behavior change, not just knowledge. And you mentioned it at the opening. I'm a big fan of what is called the COM-B model. There's tons of different models around that, but the COM-B model is very, very simple in its premise. Behavior is based on 3 different things. There's competency, or the knowledge base, there is opportunity to act on that, and there is motivation. That's what makes the COM of the B, right? The COM-B model. Behavior is predicated on knowledge and capability, opportunity to be able to act on that knowledge or access it, and then the motivation to actually do that. If you don't have any one of those pillars, good luck having demonstrable behavior change. And you can take that into the personal setting just as much, right?
Yeah.
So I think
I mean, I heard of COM-B before. I think because when I was reading through it, I think this seems familiar, but when your application of it in your sort of training of your teams, it really made me think about it on a whole new level and do the research. Clearly, the time I'd come across it before, I didn't go research it, but when I was talking to you, I did, and I love simplicity. I love simple frameworks that help distill noise.
Yep.
And allow you to kind of focus in on the problem solving that needs to happen in the moment.
Yeah.
I love the comedian. I can't remember his name right now. He was anyway. One of his bits. He talks about how you always got to focus on the alligator closest to the boat, and so and so I love going into thinking, using simple models to understand behavior.
Yeah.
You don't have to go in and understand everything. You don't need to boil the ocean, and you don't need to focus on only the science.
Yeah.
But you have to figure that balance, right?
100%. And, and I can give a very concrete example, because sometimes, some of these things you say, here's a COM-B model, apply it, and people may look at it and go like, what are you talking about? let's say that you want to go through and you say, look, we're going to arm a group of clinicians with all of the knowledge, capability, understanding that goes along with why X therapy is a game changer in the care of a certain type of patient. Okay. If that medication is restricted as a fourth line agent that has to go through prior authorization and 3-step edits before any patient would be able to access that medication, that's an opportunity problem, not necessarily a knowledge problem. And the question you're going to land into that one is, well, if that's an opportunity issue and you want to see behavior change go into that, well, what are you doing with payers to make sure that they are seeing the potential value of that? Because that may reduce that opportunity barrier. That may be helpful. From a motivation side, who needs the motivation aspect of that? I mean, is that a clinicians that have the deep motivation to do that? These are offices that have built systems to make sure that they can navigate prior authorizations and appeals and challenges for their patient because they are that convinced that that could make a difference, right? So their motivation comes into that. The patient motivation comes into that. But just only touching on the knowledge piece of that and not seeing that in the context of where they're actually practicing medicine to see whether they have also an opportunity or motivation problem, what are you solving for? So if you bring that a little bit more into your thinking, then maybe you can focus your evidence generation on things that would be useful for payers to say, oh, I get it. Maybe we should be changing the access dynamics for this. And then whether it's for the clinician side, the patient side, or even the payer side, what do you think they would find compelling or motivating to actually shift some of that knowledge base? I don't know. Start thinking about that. So yeah, that's a maybe it's very oversimplified. I get it, but we could spend an entire day talking about the models. But
I was just about to respond to it, and I'll hold that for another time. But because it would probably just trigger more conversation between us, and I want to get through these questions because people need to hear from you, Lee.
Sure.
In your opinion, what does the future hold for the medical affairs industry?
You know, I'm always a fan of if you could say it's the future's not yet here, so who knows? We'll see what it goes. I could see very easily two very different futures being possible. There is one future where medical affairs becomes more operational, more measured, more efficient, possibly by leveraging AI technology, but ultimately more replaceable. A function that manages evidence and engagement, but doesn't really shape strategy. Is that a possibility? It could be. The other one, and the one I'm much more hopeful for, is that medical affairs can become the organization's intellectual center of gravity, if you will. It's a place where uncertainty is processed. You can put real world complexity into a different level of understanding because we know the dynamics of what's happening at a clinical level. We have in-depth conversations with practitioners that give us a lens into what they're dealing with. And we can really help shape and sharpen the kind of decisions that could impact, again, clinical care behaviors and clinical care outcomes. And that will ultimately benefit the society, the healthcare community, and the organization that you're working with. So what's that going to come down to for me? For me, that's the difference between those two possible futures. I don't know, Linda, maybe you could frame it in where do you want to be? Is medical affairs going to choose to stay safe or choose to be consequential? Because you can't necessarily be both. So for me, I think the future of medical affairs is super bright, but it's also going to be more demanding. And it's just going to be a question of the organizations that will embrace that and have the willingness to go there. they're going to make medical affairs the place to be, right? I think it is already the place to be. It's why I always keep gravitating back toward it, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it has a lot of features.
It's yeah, yeah. I have to say, on my more cynical days, the the propensity for medical affairs as a profession to be more conservative, fall back into sort of antiquated behaviors,
Yeah.
mindsets. Um, on those days, I feel like, I mean, we're landing smack in that first future that you describe. If we don't proactively talk about this at scale, that we have to proactively change our direction,
Yeah.
because that is the path we're on.
Yeah.
But then I have conversations with people like you, Lee, and I'm hopeful
There's
for
hope.
the second
There's
future.
hope. There's hope. We got it. We can do it.
Absolutely. Okay.
But-
Okay, so we're going to be moving into the fun personal questions part of this conversation.
Yeah.
So the first question for you, Lee, is what advice would you give your 30-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, there's probably a few different things I would love to tell my my younger self. And every day I get reminded of the things hurt now that never used to hurt. It's really crazy. It's really crazy. So let's see, top of mind. Probably at the very top, I would say, hey, learn a little earlier to lift your eyes a little bit above the work that's right in front of you, and make sure you're understanding broader context, how decisions, power, influence, all of that is actually moving through organizations. That would be a big help. Second, younger self, stop trying to prove yourself in every room. No one is keeping score the way you think they are. If you focus instead on building a little bit better judgment, a little bit better perspective, and relationships that compound over time together with a better level of self-awareness, that's going to help you a lot more than anything else. And recognize that your career, it's not going to be a straight line. It's a series of inflection points. It's okay. That's going to make a lot more sense in hindsight. You're not going to see it all play out exactly where you want. And then probably the last one out of that is going to be a little bit more of make sure that you're protecting life outside of work a little bit more fiercely, because success without that, be careful. It can become surprisingly hollow if you're not careful. And I've seen a lot of friends that have suffered challenges on that because they just prioritize work over everything else. I mean, yeah, achievement matters when you're trying to build a certain career, but so does elements of peace and your own personal health and your family and perspective, like being able to step back and take perspective of things. All of that matters too. So, I'd go back and say, think about these a little bit more, and then just knowing my 30-year-old self, I'd be like, what is that guy talking about? I'd ignore all of it and then go learn the hard way anyway. And then
exactly.
20 years down the road saying like, you know what, if only I could tell myself these things. But yeah, it's there.
It's the sort of this exercise and of telling your younger self what you would want to learn is always a good way to convey hard-won lessons to other people. And so that's what I love most about the question. But I love the three big responses is don't forget the context. Stop trying to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still fall victim to that, frankly. And then, and then the work-life balance. I think it becomes more precious as you get older. For some reason, I don't even have a challenge at all with like checking out when I need to check out without apology. So it at some point it does become your priority.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really curious about this. Who had the greatest influence on how you lead or mentor others, and what did they teach you?
Yeah, love the question, right? I'll start by saying, I mean, I feel so fortunate across career of incredible people that I've gotten to work with. Um, I don't know. I'd say, Linda, first I'd probably give some element of it wasn't just great leaders, right? But I've also learned tremendously from difficult ones. I've learned as much from leaders who created clarity and trust as I did from those who created confusion or fear. And I hate to say that because that's not something that we should necessarily aspire to. I have been exposed to every aspect of that across career, and they both leave a mark. But I've tried to make sure that I take every opportunity that I can to learn from that, and then learn in terms of, okay, how did that impact me? What did I learn from that? Good, bad, or indifferent? And then say, how am I now going to try new things or new approaches and start applying those with my team or with people that I'm helping, and adapt and learn for what worked for me and what's resonating most with the people that I'm trying to help, either whether lead or mentor. Um, So if I had to distill that a little bit, the leaders who influenced me most were ones that I think could hold two things at once, which is high standards and genuine belief in people. These are folks that they've never lowered the bar, they raise it, and they made you feel capable of reaching it or striving for it yourself. And that balance is harder than it looks, right? And
It-
I learned a lot of lessons from some of these folks. A couple of them, if I think back and I were to say, can I pinpoint two or three people at a most critical time frame in terms of growth of my career, right? Because if I went into every person that I have learned from, again, we'd be here the entire hour, right? I mean, there are so many different people, but at a specific point in career, I mean, amazing people and a couple of them peers, and one, a more senior leader that I worked for that had such an impact on that. The people I'd call out of that one: Lucian Ionescu, Mike Davis, Luke Olenbrook. Please feel free to look them up. All three, some of the most amazing people that I got to interact for a good portion of my career together with, but each bringing something different to the table. Luke really helped me understand enterprise at a totally different level. Near term, midterm, long term strategy, sustainability of an organization, thinking 5 to 7 steps ahead, super challenging, super smart, just always kept me on my toes. It was one of those. Mike and Lucian, two of the best thought partners anybody could ever hope for, bringing very different dynamics to the table. Lucian is probably one of the most integrative scientific thinkers that I think I've ever come across, unique as an individual without doubt. He is someone who so easily flows from everything from discovery to medical to commercial thinking, and whatever it was between the two of us, we just complemented each other in every aspect. And so the more we argued and debated about things, the better it got. And having that kind of thought partner was incredible. Mike, also very similar. I would always tease Mike. He is the most scientifically gifted commercial marketing person I've ever met in my life. I think he's one of those. He's a misplaced medical affairs leader that just happened to be spending most of his time in commercial or marketing. but the same kind of dynamics in there of just holding incredibly high standards and at the same time caring for the people around them and having a genuine belief in people. Those are traits that all three of them shared. And so if I were to take all of those lessons from those folks and plenty of others that I got to work with, right? And I'd say, so what were those best lessons that I learned? I'd distill those down to kind of three things. Number one, caring for people that you have the privilege to lead is a requirement. It's not a nice to have. If you are trying to fake care in how you're leading an organization, that is the worst thing you could possibly do. If you don't genuinely care about the people that you are trying to help lead through whatever it is that you're trying to help them lead, I would question whether you should be in a leadership position, because you should deeply care about those individuals. Number two would be make sure that you are establishing trust with those folks. And when you get into and engage in conversations, do not sugarcoat it. All three of Mike, Lucien, Luke, it was one of the things I most deeply respect about each of those three individuals is they know how, and I learned from all three of them, it's okay to be blunt and straightforward. It's not an aspect of being mean. It's an aspect about, are you creating clarity? Are you helping to be explicit where you can and build confidence in others? But to do that, you of course have to have that trust component. But when you help somebody truly understand where it is they need to grow by not sugarcoating it and being there and caring for them and helping them, those people will be able to grow into roles that they may not fully see themselves in yet, but you know they have that capability, but you've got to be able to do that and kind of, so again, establish that trust, don't sugarcoat it. And the last one would be that component of listen, right? Stop trying to solve things for other people at any one moment and start trying to help and coach them to develop the skills that they need to then solve those challenges. Mentors and coaches, right? Effective ones. You're a sounding board, you're part teacher, you are all mirror, right? You should be a mirror. You are trying to help hold up a mirror so that mentees and the people that you're leading, they see in themselves what you see in potential for them. But like a good, well, clean mirror, you also can see where those flaws are and hey, it's okay. Like, what are we going to do about it? And how do we help move you in that direction? So I'd say those are some lessons. And again, there's just so many different people I could name, but those three are close to my heart and came at a time in my career where I would say was a kind of a big jump in trajectory. And just, I'm thankful to all three of them. Plus, again, everybody else that I've gotten to learn from across the years. That's a very, very long list of people.
Absolutely. I agree. The thing that I think also, first of all the lessons you learned from those mentors and the other people you've learned throughout your career and longer is pretty powerful. And because I think it is a framing of exceptional leadership that leads to development of exceptional leaders that needs to be highlighted. But the other thing that you said that really kind of landed with me is learning from people who aren't exceptional leaders and not missing just because they aren't, or they create that confusion or fear in your sphere. That, like, one of the, I still think about occasionally to this day, managers that I had, that did the opposite of developing leaders. Just gave me some of my favorite tools and books that I still use today. So I have to always remind myself to, one, quit giving headspace to to that part. You navigated it, you learned from it, and celebrate that.
Yeah.
But also, you can learn from people you don't necessarily want to emulate
Yeah.
in other ways too.
Any of those,
Insightful, I think.
and again, just professionals, right? And some of them were in alliances, some of them were in within organizations. They were other group leaders, whatever it may be. But like, you can learn some amazing things from that. It's just, again, stay curious and get every opportunity to learn you can, because it helps.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. It does help. What one or two books or other research sources, podcasts that you frequently gift or recommend to peers or friends, and why?
So I think you may know this about me. I know a lot of folks who know me well know this about me. I love to consume content, and I love to consume books. It's has become a bit of a joke that I don't post that much on LinkedIn, but every January you can see the 20 books that I read the previous year. I challenge myself each year to read 20 books. So I would say out of that, I think it depends on where people are in stage of their career development. For folks who are coming up in an organization, trying to get to being first-time managers, et cetera, really trying to understand dynamics of an organization. Two books on that one would be first, Breaking All the Rules, Marcus Buckingham, and then Thinking Fast and Slow from Canahan. I mean, just two phenomenal books. The first, Break All the Rules, ended up being the basis for not only Strength Finders, but it's pretty much every engagement survey you can think of for an organization was based off of the work that they did at the Gallup organization. Next level would be Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational, which gives you a little bit of sense into behavior and human behavior, and in that case, behavioral economics, and it's fascinating. And along those same kind of lines is a book called The Molecule of More, which is how dopamine impacts. Again, we're still medical affairs and neuroscientists, right? So The Molecule of More talks about how dopamine can affect just about every aspect of your life, right? Not just in terms of near-term gratification, but long-term satisfaction and gratification. That's a fascinating book. And one that I read over the last few years that just resonated with me incredibly, and it's a lot of it having to do with my focus and love for understanding behavior, is a book called How Emotions Are Made. And it gives you a much deeper scientific understanding of how human emotions are actually made and how much perception comes into play in that, because it's a fascinating book. It can get a little detailed in some parts, but yeah, great, really great. So again, entry versus mid versus, are you starting to think at a different level of enterprise? Those are some that I probably frequently recommend and have gifted to some folks, and why those matter, because the human emotions of how emotions are made explains a lot about why people react to certain environments and the way that they react to certain environments. So good stuff.
Yeah, those are all great recommendations. We'll definitely put them in the notes. I am not surprised that that you read more than 20 books a year and consume content. But what I love how you present it is how well curated it is around why these books can really be powerful for people. So I love you going through that. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. What is a small or uncommon habit you practice that has an outsized impact on your effectiveness or well-being?
That one's gonna be one that I'll never hear the end of this one, I'm sure, at home, but this one, all credit goes to my wife, and that was for me to better prioritize my sleep. And I can't tell you, Linda, for the longest time, I used to burn the candle at both ends without a doubt. I could tell you, and I thought that I was being incredibly effective by doing so. And what ended up happening was at some point, what I was doing exceptionally well was frustrating my wife that I was coming to bed not long after she had gone to bed. And just at the time that she was falling asleep, I'd be like, okay, now I'm going to come to bed. And she said, and then you come to bed, you basically wake me up, and then you sit there on your iPad. Just come to bed with me at the same time I go to bed. You can read on your iPad or consume videos or whatever it is that you want to do, and read and then go to sleep whenever you feel like, but at least come to bed with me. And then some of that started to turn into, you know what? I've always known more sleep is what you need for better recovery. And so I started shutting off the iPad a little bit earlier and earlier. And then I started getting into a rhythm of sleep consistency. And that sleep consistency is now like religiously and unapologetically, I prioritize sleep. We go to bed at 9 and we get up at 5 every day of the week. Doesn't matter if it's the weekend, doesn't matter if it's the week, but the consistency and that we don't shift that rhythm between weekday and weekend, I cannot tell you how much of a difference that has made. It's impacted my wellness. It's impacted my mental health. It's impacted my personal health. And without a doubt, it made me much, much sharper in the workplace because I'm well rested. What I thought I was being effective. When I first started practicing this, I had a couple of members of my team wanting to make sure I was okay. Like, what's going on with you? Because you're going at a pace that's much, much faster now. And I just said, I've just been prioritizing sleep. And they said, we kind of liked it better when you weren't sleeping as much. Like, feedback noted. Thank you. Okay. So that's really good. And then, we talk about wellness, and if you said like, what's an uncommon habit? I don't know how uncommon this is, but I'll share another one. These are from a personal point of view. Here's a little habit it may sound silly, but it has impacted my overall wellness. Immediately after dinner, I go brush and floss my teeth, and that basically creates a situation where there is zero chance of me snacking after dinner, because I'm just too lazy to go do it again. So it helped. A little silly habit that it's very effective. Mint taste, and yeah, I'm good. I don't need anything else to eat that night.
I know somebody else who does that, and they say it works. And I haven't adopted it yet. I need to, but
It's great. It's great. It sounds really silly, but it's really effective. At least for me, it's super effective.
That's awesome. Those are two great things: prioritizing sleep and brushing your teeth right after dinner. Good ones. How do you recharge or maintain resilience when work becomes intense or overwhelming?
For me, it's always an aspect of I draw a lot from family and what I've built outside of work. I mean, it gives me joy. It gives me whatever you want to call it, perspective, proportion. I've just been much more intentional in the last several years of making sure that I'm protecting that kind of mental and physical well-being than much more than I did earlier in my career. And just making sure that I take time to, really when the kids come over, it's the aspect. We have two grown women who are and becoming professionals, and now it's so fun to see them grow up, and you can have peer conversations with them rather than parent to child conversations, and just making sure that I soak that in and spend time with them and their partners. That's great. That's a way to make sure to protect that, and then just make sure that I'm carving out that time for calm and recovery and meaning, so that I can keep showing up well over the long term for the folks within my organization. And another good friend of mine, Cordula Bug, who fantastic HR business partner that I got to work with. I always loved the theme that she and I went into, which was this kind of concept of, you know how right the airlines have it when they say put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others? You have to do the same in leadership capacity. If you're not taking time to, ensure that you're protecting that piece of calm and recovery, and that you yourself are well oxygenated, you're not going to show up well for others. You're not going to be able to help others. You're going to be impaired in trying to do that. So, yeah, that's just carving out that time, making time for it.
Oh, that's great. That's so awesome. What purchase under $100 changed your life?
I think it's a super cool question, right? Because we there's a lot of stuff that you could have that, like, wait a second, for under $100 nowadays, what would it be? So I will admit this carries massive recency bias. So but that I'd have to say in the past year, uh, it's been a pro subscription to Suno AI. So if the folks at Suno AI are listening to this, thank you. You have no idea how impactful your model and offering has been to my own personal well-being. If you're
Wow.
not familiar with Suno AI, it is a dedicated platform that lets you create music. I am not a musician, but I love music and I like great lyrics. And I started playing around with the concept of, could I actually write a song and leverage other AI models to kind of, like, here's what I want to write a song about, and this is what I think it is, and you could work on lyrics, and it's something that you put out in 5 minutes. It's something you really have to work for. But then it's like, how do you imagine that into an actual song? I'm not a musician, I can't compose. Suno kind of lets you do that and explore different categories, and it was a creative outlet and an emotional outlet that I didn't know I needed. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and really, and the emotional component of being able to, I don't know how to describe it, Linda. It's been cathartic to some component of it. It's been energizing. It's been sheer joy out of it because you can create something and then put it to music. Yeah, without a doubt, best. It was under $100 for a year subscription. Without a doubt, the best purchase I've made that has really made a difference in my life in the last year and a half.
It's awesome that it's a creative outlet that has been the most impactful. And it's not that sort of tracks with what the more I know you, that I'm not surprised by these types of things that when you share them, because that's just it. This is kind of exemplifies who you are in a way. It's like you're looking for that beyond content, that context beyond. I love it.
Yeah, and again, it's just being able to express it and get it out. It's and music for so many people, right? Like, music can, you can define moments in your life based on the song that you were hearing. So to be able to play around with something like that, it's been phenomenal. So yeah, again, thank you to the folks at Suno.
All right, here's the last question. If you had a giant billboard visible to everyone in medical affairs, what would it say and why?
I'm gonna say I think pretty much anyone that has really closely worked with me in the last 10 years should be able to guess what I'm about to say. You could almost challenge yourself and say you could put this podcast on video and try to put it on pause and then write it down. What's my billboard gonna say? Because this is gonna be a billboard that's gonna be split in 2 panels, one thing on the left and one thing on the right. So people right now are pausing and saying, yeah, I know exactly what this one's gonna be. The left side of the billboard would say, family first. It's all about experiences. You will never find time. You have to make time. And the other side of the billboard is going to say individuals first, team dynamics second, what we do third. those are the models by which I lead my personal life and my professional life. So if I were putting out a billboard, without a doubt, that's exactly what it would say. Family first. It's all about experiences. You will never find time. You have to make time. The other one, individuals first, team dynamics second, what we do third. Because when you take care of number 1 and number 2, number 3 magically takes care of itself.
I love that. I love how thoughtful every one of your answers have been today. I think they're going to have a really powerful impact on the audience. And this time has just flown by, and I have really appreciated your engagement.
Thank you so much for having me on and for creating a platform where, people can learn from other people. And I hope for the folks that are listening to this, no matter where you are in your journey and your career, if you've been around the block like I have and like you have, Linda, what are you doing to help those around you succeed in what they're doing? If you're newer in your journey and you're hoping to gain some insight out of this, that's great. And then go have a conversation with a real person within your organization, a leader within your organization, and go ask them some of these questions and go chat with them and go get perspective from them. You'd be surprised. Good, genuine leaders want to help people grow, and they're happy, most of them, happy to carve out some time to sit down and talk with you and give you some perspective. And you'll figure out your own journey as part of that. You'll make mistakes. That's okay. Pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep going forward and keep learning from those around you. So it takes 2 to tango on that one. The leaders, go help them. The ones who are coming up, stay curious. Go ask more questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much.